actually, I think.
I'm not complaining. I'm just curious. Like, right. Uh, uh, wasn't just curious. Just curious. Ram bam ba ya 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 do ho ya 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 ram bam bam ba yam bam ba yo ho da ya 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 ha ya ma ma ha ya 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 da ya 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 ha ya 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 ha ya 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 hey hi 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 da ya hi ha ma 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 do do ho ay 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 ya mama did da ya ya hey da ya ay hey ay hey da ya ya hey ay 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 hey da mama ya ha 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 Hi, da ya ya, hey da ya. So we're in our final shir for Elul, which has taken us through the dialogue of Moshe Rabbeinu with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that took place from the beginning of Elul, that he effected a key change in the way of living with Hashem, that shifted the nature of the bris, really, from being one which is built on Zechirat Zchus Avos, to a different possibility, as Rashi explains, that like Shetama Zchus Avos, when the Zchus of the Avos is finished, what then? And Moshe Rabbeinu prepares the way for that change, and that change really being a complete reorganization of the way in which we are with God, the way in which it's not panay elechu v'hanichoti lach. It's certainly not malachi elech lefanecha, but rather it's Belechtecha imanu, hodieni na drachecha, ve'edacha lemanem tachein be'enecha. A real revision of a life that's no longer built on some kind of external guidance, but is built on a common path that itself is being devised and designed through this really extraordinary interaction between our awareness, our vision, our participation, our self, and the reality that is the one in which we live, which creates and provides the format and the context for that growth and development, and in which there are elements that are embedded, and which the intention is that those embedded elements not be the determinants of your personal creation, but rather be the context for your personal creation as you evolve, and the levels of reality that are open to that kind of creative shifting become organized and nourish you as you yourself organize your own selfhood in that context. And so this kind of a siach, really, this kind of a conversation, of a dialogue that's happening between us and our world, between us and creation, between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is really the reality which is described by Chazal as Shriyas Hashchina, and we saw that what Moshe Rabbeinu was asking for was that Shriyas Hashchina, as we saw in the Targum of Yunklus, in the way that the Chachamim explain what he was saying. We saw that this is mamish, like it's really a magnificent moment, and also in the context of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's choice to leave the world when in Gan Eden, Rishon made the choice that he chose, and immediately, mamish immediately heard the Kol Elokim Mithalech Bagan, that God's walking had now become a self-reflexive walking. He's mithalech. The mithalech, which Chazal then indicate, is a description of the Siluk HaShechina. Exactly. The reason that it's called the Siluk HaShechina is because Hashem's walking now has become divided from the walking of Adam by the choice of the Achila Me'etzadat, and as the medrash that I brought last time describes, each of the subsequent generations of Chet that then came subsequent to Adam HaRishon, and by virtue of Adam HaRishon, each were Mesalik the Shechina a different level. But the Siluk HaShechina is always in that first depiction, which the Chumash gives Siluk HaShechina, which is that the Kol Hashem is mithalech. He continues to be more and more intensely mithalech. So I mean, you see, I just said how beautiful the Chumash describes this movement away, because the first response to that hithalchut of God, of walking within himself, was with Abraham, as the Medrash describes, that he was the first to draw the Shekhinah down, back out of her really, I guess, self-involvement would be a way to humanize that description, and and uh, and then Hakadosh Baruch Hu is offered to Avraham Avinu, besides the calling of Lech Lecha, as the opening away from the Hitalech, as a new possibility, which we're going to explore more today, of a new possibility of how that walking might be, moving Avraham into Hitalech Lefanai Veheyeh Tamim, with Avraham still being on the level of a personal and self-centered involvement, but nevertheless it's a hitalech lefanai. It's with a consciousness and an awareness of Hakadosh Baruch Hu in his context for that. The lech lecha being towards himself, but nevertheless it's all a part of a process of becoming a bracha, v'heyeh bracha, becoming a blessing to Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and becoming the extension, so to speak, the addition, so to speak, onto Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We explored last time the meaning of bracha. Did we? No, we didn't talk about that. Okay, so I'll point that out also because it's relevant. Okay, Baruch Atah, and the emphasis on the Atah. Has that been here? Okay, not sure. I'll explain it in a moment. In any case, the shift that needs to be away from hitalech, mithalech, is offered to Avraham really into hitalech lefanai. It's very, very beautiful, and the bracha that he becomes a bracha in the context of the divine. And what I mean by that, the v'heyeh bracha of Avraham, we'll just take this as a bit of an aside, although it's extremely valuable in terms of kavanas atfilah also. But to Abraham's invitation of becoming a bracha is really elemental to the value, I would say, of lech lecha. Lech lecha, which Rashi describes as lahanatcha letovatcha, right, as being for his own benefit and his own good, could become a very selfish venture, as the West has amply proved. But the ending of the tzivui to Avraham of v'heyeh bracha is already the indication of is already the indication that we're describing a lech lecha in a very particular context, and that context is to become bracha. Now, in order to appreciate this, and then we'll bring it back to what's happening between Moshe Rabbeinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In order to appreciate this, you have to appreciate the meaning of bracha, and people miss this, and it's really unfortunate. And I can tell you, it's a complete shift that I promise you. In terms of what it means to say a bracha, and then we'll see why this is the crucial beginning of where then Moshe Rabbeinu will take things, because the meaning of bracha is very very profoundly tied into the meaning of creation itself, and the reason for this is because the very reality that we live is the reality of bracha. That is the definition of the bria. It's not something that God awards the bria. It's the definition of the bria. And we see this in that the medrash that I've quoted in the past, the medrash in which the otiot, the letters, come before Kadosh Baruch Hu and say, create the world with me. And so that medrash begins with the tav, saying, create the world with me. And Hashem says, no, I can't be with you because you're mavet, you're the end. So then the shin comes in and tries, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, no, you're sheker, right? You stand on only one point. So then the reish comes in, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, no, that's roa. The kuf comes in, the kilkul. There's There's no, even tzaddik comes in and God manages to find a word that doesn't work. until finally, they all fail and we end up with the Beis. And the Beis comes in and the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, you are what creation will begin with Bereshit, because you are bracha. You are bracha. So of course the Ibn Ezra says on this is ridiculous, and he goes through a whole amazing use of words that begin with Beis that all are very negative. It's like, in order to say, it's a beautiful piece in the Ibn Ezra that like this makes absolutely no sense. The sense that it makes obviously is not, in the external of it, but in the tzura of it, in the overarching vision that it's describing. It's mamish, a magnificent medrash. It's in the Otiot Rabbi Akiva, and it's in the Zohar. Because what the medrash is actually describing is the nature of creation. The nature of creation is bracha. In fact, even the same two first letters, it's not just the Beis, it's the Beis and the Reish that are actually definitive of the commonality between bracha and breshit. Because what bracha means is tosefet. This is Rabbeinu Bechaya says, right? Also in the parsha of Bikurim, and he also says it in Parshas Ekev. He talks about Ve'rachta Hashem Elokecha. The meaning of bracha is tosefet. The meaning of creation is tosefet. The meaning of bar is to stand outside. The meaning of breshit and bracha is to stand outside. It's to allow for, not only to allow for, but to invest in the otherness of the other. So that is itself the bracha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the meaning of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's having breshit as a bracha. That's what it is. So that in as much as breshit is able to establish itself as a tosefet, to establish itself as a bracha to God, that in as much as that is accomplished, so the purpose of creation is accomplished. And that will involve two things, which is exactly what bracha speaks to. It will involve the growth and fostering of the independence and inner guidance of purposiveness and will on the part of creation, and it will involve an ongoing awareness of my activity in that self-actualization being a bracha to God. If I lose that second awareness, so then we've lost the creation as a bracha. It's no longer a bracha. It's just doing its own thing. And then it becomes your own hithalchut of walking within yourself. But it ceases to be a bracha to the divine. And if you lose the personal quest and involvement and investment and realization, then you also lose creation as a bracha, because there's nothing that is separate. It just becomes a robotic imprint or imitation, or whatever it would be. So this is like it's an absolute definition of what the whole underlying drive of that stands behind the creative process on the part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is embedded in. So the Medrash is a precise description, and this is something that then when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Avraham Avinu, when I say to you Lech Lecha, I'm saying to you Lech Lecha, the Tovatcha, Lahanatcha, etc. But understand that what I'm saying to you is that in the context of the Heyeh Bracha. The Heyeh Bracha means that in that you become a bracha to me. And the Rabbeinu Bechaya describes this in the mitzvah of Birkas Hamazon, of Ve'rachta Hashem Elokecha, where he says very simply, he says, Uve'rachta et Hashem Elokecha. Wait a minute. Like what what exactly are we doing when we say Uveirachta et Hashem Elokecha? That's a very strange thing to say. A very strange thing to say. And the Rashba, who's brought in the Ein Yaakov on Daf Zayin in Brachos, in the story of Rabbi Yishmael Kohen Gadol, who goes into the Kodesh Kodashim, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Katriel, etc., who's ever in there, says to Yishmael Kohen Gadol, says to him, Racheni b'ni. So the Rashba says, you see that you cannot explain bracha as being shevach, nor can you really explain it as being tefillah. It's something else. It's tosefet. And without explicating any more, he's a Rishon. He doesn't have to explicate anymore. He's not explicating anymore. That's the way he leaves it. It's an absolutely astounding thing. And it has to do, by the way, with him saying, Dafka Yishmael B'ni. Like if he hadn't said B'ni, so then it would have been a very different medrash. Right? But because he says Yishmael B'ni, what God is describing is exactly the point. Namely that you are an extension, so to speak, of my existence that is in what? Exactly, that's embodied in you. The Aramaic for Ben being bar. And therefore I can speak to you as Barcheni, not because of the words you're going to say to me, but by virtue of the reality which you realize in your life. That reality then becomes reflected in the words you say. Fine. But it's only by virtue of that dual consciousness. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says this is later extended. I think here we did explore this in the context of Nativ Hayira, in the most amazing Chazal, right, where they take the words of Moshe, Ma Hashem Elokecha Shuel Mimach Ki Im Liyira Oti, and they destroy them. They destroy them. It turns from a question, right, from a question of what is God asking of you, except that you should have yira of me, they turn it into a statement. Meya Hashem Elokecha Shuel Mimach Ki Im Liyira Oti. He's asking for Meya Brachot. So people look at that as like, that's, very a stretch, right? A clever stretch, in order to impose upon us another religious obligation, right? But the depth of it is just so profound, because what Chazal are describing is what it means to shift a condition of ma, which is a condition of abnegation, into a condition of plurality and realization. It's the shift from the ma Hashem Elokecha Shuel Mimach as a statement also. God is asking of you to become ma, which is the description of the yira, shifting that into, that's not what he's asking for. And this is the way Chazal always do it. From the very beginning, as we pointed out, when God calls Adam Arishon to take him into Gan Eden, and the pasuk says that Vayikach es Adam, that he took Adam into Gan Eden, and Chazal immediately intervene and say, no, he spoke to Adam, and he described to him how beautiful it is. Always Chazal are insistent on this very same nikuda, right, which we're emphasizing right now, that it's not the ma Hashem Elokecha Shuel Mimach, but it's meya, the meya brachot. The meya brachot is a description of how, the plethora of phenomena, the innumerable contacts that we have with a realized creation is the most kaleidoscopic and magnificent range of access points to exactly this realization of bracha. Meaning that every time you take something and make a bracha on it, what you're touching is the affirmation of God's commitment and investment in there being this um, life that is a sharing of his existence. So every time, so Mea is the number. It's the number of 10 times 10, et cetera, et cetera. It's a whole number. It's a number which is really a way to describe this. It's like it's fullness, endless. It's open. It's just you're going to be meeting this, and if you don't, then there's something wrong with you. So we're going to turn it into a religious obligation to force you to contact the world. And there's no way that you can get to those Mea Brachot without Birkos Haneni. You can't. And the Mishnah Berurah makes a cheshbon. Could we get away with this fasting? Could we get away with this fast? It's like funny, but it's very, very deep. And you can't get away with it fasting unless you start smelling things and looking at things, and like you're not experiencing things. Exactly. It's an amazing Mishnah Berurah. It goes through the whole cheshbon, but people miss the whole point. It's like the whole point of the Mishnah Berurah is you can't get to Mea Brachot by just fulfilling religious obligations. The only way you can get to Mea Brachot is by contacting the planet and noticing it, and recognizing that this is God's desire, that there should be this kind of a effulgence, this kind of fertility. Yeah, it's more than an invitation. It becomes an obligation, and it needs to become an obligation because you need to define the nature of your existence by insisting on things because of the idiosyncrasies of human spiritual life, right? So it's just like it's brilliant. It's like turning the ma of the obligation into mea is a precise inversion of where things might have gone to. So that's really the truth of Yira. That's the truth of Yira. Yira is not Yira is as we explained in the Tiva Yira at length, right? Yira is the experience of the intensity of an awareness of other in a way in which it's so intense that the recognition becomes that my existence itself is tenuous and beyond. It's contingent upon the ongoing investment in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire that I be here, which is exactly the point of bracha in its most intense form. It's not that now he's given us existence and now do with it what you do with it. It's that this is an ongoing investment. It's not like he threw us the gauntlet now, so let's see how you go. It's like no, it's like it's a living and ongoing investment which is reflected and revealed in the act of bracha, right? In the act of bracha. That's why it's even the yira, because you're constantly not only seeing him and not only it's not about pachad at all. It's about a consciousness of this investment being present and ongoing at every moment. So then that becomes a whole new experience of bracha. What happens if you recognize this about bracha is that every time you're picking something up, you are actually entering in to the condition of baruch atah. Now I'll just say this as a simple kavana in bracha. When you say a bracha, what actually is being established is baruch atah. In other words, I am declaring that you, in being baruch, meaning the one who is of addition, the one who is of addition. That's how it really needs to be translated, right? You are the one who is of addition. It's the best you can do in English. Because you are the one who is of addition, therefore I can say to you, Ata. I can talk to you in the second person, because the whole commitment of your investment is that I should be able to stand here, nochach pnei Hashem, that I should be able to stand here in what's nochach pnei Hashem in English? It's standing in the presence of, right? Standing, it's in Hebrew it's more of like it's not just standing in the presence of, it's standing across from, facing. That's the word. Across, facing Hashem. Right? So so that becomes like it's a totally it's a total and very very beautiful awareness to and crucial really awareness that becomes inculcated every time you say Baruch Atah. If you turn it into, so to speak, a sacramental act, right? Exactly. It's just like it's just allowing me to eat this. If you don't say thank you, you're about to pull the thing down. If you don't say thank you, then you're stealing from God. These are all very true. They're entirely true. But the problem is that they get translated in a religious language. They get translated into an accusation of your ingratitude, an accusation of your unfairness, your filth, your greediness, your etc. etc. Can't you say thank you? Okay, you're right. I should say thank you, but that has absolutely nothing to do with bracha, nor does it have anything to do with what the Gemara is describing there. When you talk about a matir, you're not talking about a matir because we're afraid that you won't be grateful. You're talking about a matir in the sense that you're actually now joining in the creative activity of opening the channel to the investment, to the continued investment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Bria, such that it should be able to stand on its own. That I was like, that's a whole shift, right? That means then the matir is it's an active participation in making this be able to be here, because were you to take it without saying bracha, so basically what's happening is you are undermining. You're undermining what? Yeah, exactly. You enter into your own mit halech when you take without the recognition of Baruch, and what then that does is creates a mirroring on the part of the Shekhinah that she's also mit halech, right? So what the Gemara says basically, or the Gemara says not just basically, literally, what the Gemara says is you're gozel aviv v'imo. Gozel aviv v'imo, when you take fruit from this planet, or take any hana from this planet without saying a bracha. The gzela is not that it wasn't yours before, now it's yours in the simple sense. The gzela is that you're taking away from the Shechina its pleasure of sharing. Pleasure of sharing. If you steal, you undermine the whole thing. So you see that ultimately will be later in Moshe Rabbeinu, right? That we arrive at this level and we're mitaking. This, by the way, is beautifully located in Parshas Eikev, right? Which is about the heel, the walking, like Navaya Eikev. It's about the processes which need to be recognized and identified. And the most primary process which needs to be identified and recognized is this most initial seed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's sharing, right? Which is in that moment of creation and of bracha. So just to bring us back into context, you see like what's going on here. So the Shekhinah is initially mithalech. Adam Arishon takes of the fruit. In entirely opposite intention of bracha, in order to award himself existence as separate, independent, and not contingent, such that thinking, so to speak, right, such that he should indeed realize the divine purpose. Instead, becomes a mithalech rather than a mevarech. And then the mamish you can see like as a tzura of the process the Chumash is describing, this whole devolution in that direction until Avram Avinu arrives. Literally the way the Medrash describes it. And then of Avram, of Yitzchak, of Yaakov, until finally we get to the seventh place, and the seventh point, which is here in the parsha that we've been exploring, with Moshe Rabbeinu's saying, right, Halo v'lechtecha imanu, Halo v'lechtecha imanu, isn't that what you wanted always? And that then the Medrash says is where Moshe Rabbeinu brought down the Shechina in the final return of the Shechina down to be Dar B'Tachtonim, which enabled there to be a Yom Kippurim, and enabled there to be a Luchos Shnim, which is an entire revision of the nature of Torah, etc. Right. So this is and what it gets built on, right, is this very very personal involvement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu is insisting this. It's got to be very very personal from now on. It's not about the Zechor Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. We're in a new era now. We're in a new era, and it's an era that is built on the Chaim, which I have in your eyes. Right? There's a very very personal involvement. Okay, so this is it's a summary with a lot of enrichment around like the span of what we're witnessing here in these moments, and what we're meant to be experiencing in this time right now as Elul has passed through us, and as we now are stepping towards its conclusion with Rosh Hashanah, which Bezrat Hashem will have a chance to spell out some of today. Okay, yeah. So comments or questions about these last three shiurim. Yeah, great.
Well, I'm wondering about the benefit, so to speak, of what is necessary in that process. He speaks of tshuva, like how do I understand the places where I haven't done in the mind this way, and how is that adding also in some adding to the process? How do I understand it?
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, I hear you wondering, like, what place does my straying off the path of walking with Hashem in this mutual project? What place do all those strayings have in the path? What place do they have in the path? Yeah, okay, it's a beautiful open question, and it's definitely a present question, and certainly very, very real for issues around tshuva. If I might just point out, right, that that it's in a sense a question which Rashi responds to in the beginning of Parshas Nitzavim. So Rashi says that there's a very real reason that parsha is put there. Right next to the parsha of the Kitavo, with all of the klalos and the yisurim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu describes are going to be coming upon us. He says, Rashi says, look at this, atem nitzavim hayom, and that's not just a description of the current. It's something that he's saying to all the souls of the Jewish people that are ever to be. He's saying to them, atem nitzavim hayom, so that every person who's part of that needs to always be able to hear Atem Nitzavim Hayom, which means that Ma Hayom Hazeh, Rashi says, Ma Apil Umeir, Kach Atem, V'Hayisurim Hamekaimim Etchem. Rashi then takes it a step further, and he says the Yisurim that you've experienced are actually what are Mekayim, and the Kilkulim are actually what are Mekayim, Klalos and the Kilkulim are Mekayim. So that's a very broad vision, which serves really as the introduction to the parsha that introduces tshuva. Right? I don't want to go too far off, but you can see how Rashi is speaking to that. Like what is there a way, we'll put it like this, is there a way in which, um, is there a way in which when the process breaks down, when the path is strayed from, is there a way which it can correct itself? And so Rashi is saying, yeah, the way that it corrects itself is in some kind of a reorganization of what has preceded into being participant and enriching elements in a realignment with the path. If somehow those are revealed to be an enrichment rather than a destruction, but that requires the process of tshuva. It's so interesting because today in Bar Ilan there's a kenes. There's someone in Bar Ayin who organizes these conferences on Torah and Mada, you know, and so after listening to the shir on Shabbos, you know, like he's very excited. Wow, great guy. But so they're having a kenes today. Told me in Bar Ilan on network theory and its ability the ability of networks to repair themselves, something like this, which I'm not really so familiar with the self-repairing networks, and the chap is that they're doing it in the context of discussing tshuva. So they have a professor of physics that's describing network theory and this kind of processes of self-repair. And then Rav Shapley Rapport's going to, you know, discuss it in the context of yes, great stuff going on. So I'll have recordings of it if anyone's interested in hearing it in English. I think it. I don't even notice anymore. It was in English, probably in Hebrew. Probably. But, yeah. Okay, so yeah.
I just have a quick question. Like, so if you're in the presence of so sometimes I'm in the presence of like children who, family members who are not religious, and they want to know why I'm looking up, and this is a great opportunity to bring them into that world that we're talking about. Like without giving them a half-hour share, like a bullet point to say to them, like,
yeah, I would say the bullet. Yeah, I would say
yeah.
I don't know if it'll be in their language because I don't know how sophisticated they'll be. But if you can first of all, I would say the greatest teaching is in what you exude. The greatest teaching is in what you exude. In other words, if in the act of making a bracha, there is a deep experience on your part of being a bracha, of being a joyous reflection of the desire of existence to share itself through my being and through my tactile contact with the embodiment of existence. That's the modality through which he has shared himself. The hana, which is the lech lecha, lehanascha, letovascha. Two extremely important words also in the context of bracha. If you're exuding that, so then people will know what's going on. They'll know what's going on. If you're not exuding that, what I think you could explain to them, and then or if you are, the way you would explain it and enunciate it is it's that the experience of making a bracha for me is the joy of the gifting that I have been gifted with life. That itself is my avenue for a contact with the divine. So when I say Baruch Atah, I'm very deeply aware of being the creature that's able to say Baruch Atah. Like only a creature we'll put it like this, only a creature aware of the value of its being here, only a creature that's aware of the value of its being here as a freely choosing and able to create creature, and in that way able to realize the divine will that there be a Tosefet. Only a creature like that could ever say Baruch. If you don't know it about yourself, then you cannot say Baruch. How would you say Baruch if you think you're a piece of dirt? If you think you're a piece of dirt, you can't say Baruch because you don't have an appreciation of the fact of having been created. And you've got to have it. It's not enough for you to know that it's a good thing overall, but I'm a piece of dirt. It's like that's not good enough because you've got to be able to say Atah. You got to say Atah. So to be able to say Baruch Atah in the second person, that means that you have to be very, very aware of being a mevarech in your being, That otherwise, if it were just in the third person, if we're just in the third person, yeah, Baruch Hashem, right? Like that's the standard avoidance, right?
Because what you're saying is I'm not
That's
here.
mamish the standard avoidance.
You're saying I'm not here.
That's right.
I ask you a question, how are you doing? You say Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
I missed you there.
That's a perfect. It's a sad commentary on it's really an endemic issue in a religious society, which is obligation or structure oriented.
It doesn't have to do with me.
But it doesn't have anything to do with me. So you say Baruch Hashem to say it in the third person. If Chazal is just so deep, if Chazal had just made the bracha Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, why not? Why not? I mean, after all, the model for bracha is Yisrael. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem, right? His Baruch Hashem was not Baruch Hashem, but because Vayichad Yitro, because he became very mechuded.
Who's has an experience of what was happening?
Exactly. So this is exactly it. He is Yitro. I mean, that's mamish what he is the Yeter. So we don't have to worry about him. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, just notice that, right? He introduces that term, but you can only introduce that term in right consciousness if you yourself are holding it. You're a Yeter. You are a Yeter, right? But in any case, if Chazal had been metaken, the matbea of the bracha, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, it would have been a disaster. It would have been a disaster, which anyway happened. Which is that what is lost in that is the insistence that it has to be something that you are present to, and that you can say to God Atah. If you can't say to God Atah, Baruch Atah, so then that means that all you're left with is Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Everything's great. Don't ask me about me. Everything's great.
How are you doing?
On top of that, I hear you emphasizing a lot on the Baruch, the fact of your own differentiation with the creature that's able to stand. But I sort of feel like, well, I could get that from the Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha is a differentiated self. Who has the Hana and the Baso? Where does the bracha?
It's in the Atah. It's in the Atah. In other words, the element of Atah is that what you're describing HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Baruch. That's the difference between that and if Lech Lecha had been only it's standing on its own, right? Because the Lech Lecha standing on its own is all the things that people talk about of realization and self-actualization and emergence of my identity and all those things which are wonderful things, or they're the absolute evil, the absolute evil in the sense of total minus, in which there's nothing of concern and care for me except myself, in that very small and egocentric sense. That is total roa, and you can see how subtle it is. It's total roa. It takes nothing. It takes nothing to change it into that, or take it into the vast vision. It takes a true.
It's not actually Yisro who introduces the phrase.
Well, it's Baruch Hashem's first.
Oh, Baruch Hashem.
Ah, okay.
And he's the one who's in it to see what he can gain from it.
Okay. I'll say it. First one to say it in a good way. Lavan.
That's exactly the second.
Yeah, exactly. He's also the first one to be happy. Lavan's the first one who says he wanted to be happy. Right. You see, yeah, he tries to take over these kinds of things. Okay. In any case, great. Thanks.
And from that image of the Shekhinah kind of coming into herself, so to speak, it's very powerful. In my mind, I'm delineating what is going in a positive sense, and what is in a deepening and a growing and a connective type of going in, as opposed to kind of a going in which is, as we talked about this in the other room, like a cave type of place. I'm going inside, but I'm cutting everything off, for myself around me. What's that? Yeah, and just I was thinking just of myself, and that when certain things happen, that's a process of going in, not in that way that allows for connectivity, but in a process that allows for disconnection. And very powerful that Abraham is the one that brings that out. That reminds me of the Midrash, and illustrates another angle of the Biro Doleket, and the Tzitz Me'elav, right? The Shekhinah kind of comes out of the Biro Doleket, being drawn out from that kind of cave, that building into the world, so to speak.
Beautiful right, that it was the question of Abraham Mibal Abira, that's his quest for discovering the author of the book that draws the Shekhinah out. And you can learn a lot from that about the way we come out of ourselves too. It's like a loving. Sometimes it's just a loving glance that reminds you. It's the look of Chaim that brings us out of ourselves. Sometimes that's what you described. And that's why I think that measure is so touching to you. There's something there in Avram's desire to know, his desire to know that draws Hashem out, and it's very formative in terms of Moshe Rabbeinu was asking, I want to know you. I want to know you. I want to know you as an act of love and of growing out from that from the cave. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. So this whole process then, right, which Moshe Rabbeinu is again and this whole conversation which he's conducting during the course of Elul, basically, right, is and establishes the qualities of Elul, then leads forward really into what becomes in a sense the conclusion and the height of this process, which is at Yom Kippur, but has along the way the realization of Rosh Hashanah, and the special life that Rosh Hashanah offers. Okay, so I think did you prepare Rambam's piece there in the morning? Did I take a look at that? What's that? I'm just looking at whether to go there with you. You should see it. Huh? Sorry? Hey, what are you doing?
Nothing.
So, I'm just now thinking about the time and thinking about where I could take it would be most useful for you, not just in terms of the all right, so the two, I think we won't go there now, but rather we'll bring up the question, like what wait a minute. So look what's going on. Look what's going on. Okay, fine. We'll build it like this. Look what's going on here. So now, I mean, we have to remember always the context that things are being conducted within, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu has now brought this revision of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relationship into actualization. It is, as we've seen now, the primary purpose of what creation is about is that there should be this bracha, which is a consciousness of my participation with God in kiviyachol, making a tosefet upon him, and that then brings us incredibly, right, to the day of the creation of man. Because the end of Elul is, of course, the day on which Adam Harishon made the mistake and created the mithalech of the Shekhinah. So, in order to bring about a tikkun for what happened there in Gan Eden, to be having Moshe Rabbeinu Mamish using these words and talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about this during this time is magnificent. I mean, it means that there's a meta awareness that's going on in this interaction, which is Elul's preparation towards this brit, in which we need to, as we explained in the very first shiur, we need to create a psol lecha. We need to create a sense of the chen between us. We need to establish our being jointly in the realization in order to arrive at the end of Elul with the right stance and the rectification of what happened, so to speak, at the end of the first Elul. The first Elul, which began with Kaf Hey Elul. Right? Obviously, the times are not relevant in the original version, right? But subsequent to there being time in the world, that's what's going on. I mean, basically, so now these final days that we're in now, towards Rosh Hashanah, this is it. This is like the final. This is the way we can prepare ourselves during the course of Elul with Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai for the rectification of the Shekhinah's sivuk into being a mithalech. So this all makes even more profound the way the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva describes to us what it is that Rosh Hashanah is doing, what is it Rosh Hashanah is offering us. And in order to appreciate this, so we'll read a bit of what the Rambam teaches about Rosh Hashanah. Obviously, we're not going to be able to cover the whole thing, but at least in the context that we've been exploring things. So the Rambam actually, how's the best way to do this? The Rambam tells us a few things about the nature of the day of Rosh Hashanah. One is a passage that we've explored in the past, I hope, about Hatayas Atzmo L'Derech. We talked about that? Hatayas Atzmo L'Derech, Torah, Hatayas Atzmo L'Derech, we talked about Hataya and Derech. One, the Rambam, getting blank looks. Okay, so the Rambam writes about what actually happened in Gan Eden. What actually happened in Gan Eden was the following. In Perek Hey of Hilchos Tshuva, Reshut Kol Adam Netunalo. Reshut is given to man. Im Ratzah Lahatot Atzmo L'Derech Tova V'Liot Tzadik HaReshut Biyado. Im Ratzah Lahatot Atzmo L'Derech Ra'a V'Liot Rasha HaReshut Biyado. Hu shekatuv b'Torah Hein ha'adam haya ke'echad mimenu ladat tov v'ra. Now this is very, very powerful because the Rambam is describing the declaration of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, which sounds like a cry of distress in the Chumash. Hein ha'adam haya ke'echad mimenu ladat tov v'ra, as being a description of this, the nature of the existence of what it means to be a human being. Very strange. And then goes on and says the explanation of that pasuk, Hein ha'adam haya ke'echad mimenu ladat tov v'ra, which sounds like man has become like one of us to know Tov V'Ra. The Rambam reads the following way, and this is actually in the Targum. Klomar hein min ze shel Adam haya echad ba'olam ve'ein lo min sheni dome lo b'zeh ha'inyan sheyehu me'atzmo b'da'ato v'machshavto yodea hatov v'hara oseh kol ma shehu chafetz ve'ein lo mi sheyakev al yado milasot hatov v'hara v'kevan shekein pen yishlach yado, etc. Listen carefully. There's a lot here, and we'll just explore a piece of this. So the Rambam says the following: the reading of this pasuk is, if you have like a Hilchos Tshuva, okay, you open it up. If not, just listen. The meaning of this is that the species of humanity has now become unique in the world. Exactly. Haya ha'adam haya ke'echad, he has become an absolutely unique. Ke'echad becoming the kaf of intensification. He's become absolutely unique. Haya echad ba'olam. Okay, now what's the mimenu? Mimenu me'atzmo v'dato v'machshavto yodea hatov v'hara. From within himself now, he knows good and bad. V'oseh kol ma shehu chafetz, and can now do whatever it is that he desires. Ve'ein lo mi sheyakev al yado milasot hatov o hara. So what's being described here is the existential definition of what it means to be a human being, what makes us unique and different from all other creatures, that we have a self-creative will that is from within ourselves, not externally defined and imposed upon us, and we can creatively involve ourselves with creation. Okay, so in what's called Tov V'Ra, which is something which obviously needs its own exploration, is very important. But okay, I just want to point this out, that what the Rambam here is describing is the nature of what it means to be a human being, and we become that by virtue of having eaten from the Eitz Hadat Tov V'Ra, which is a very strange situation, right? That by virtue of having violated what HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded, we become what we apparently need to become in terms of being this unique creature. So clearly, he's very much aware of this. Nevertheless, that's the way things worked out, right? That's the way things worked out. Now notice that the Rambam was very, very careful in his describing what you have what you have the freedom of choice about. He said, "Im ratza lahatot atzmo lederech tova v'liyot tzadik hareshut biyado." This is very, very wordy. This is very wordy. He could have simply said, "Im ratza liyot tzadik hareshut biyado, im ratza liyot rasha hareshut biyado." Why go through all of this? Im ratza lahatot atzmo. Oh my gosh, like if he wants to lean himself towards the path, then he has the reshut to do that, to be like, because what the Rambam is describing, which is elemental, is that what you have the reshut to do is to tend yourself towards a path. The end result of that path becoming a tzaddik. You cannot choose to be a tzaddik and then realize that. Because what's crucial to the Rambam is that the reshut is that you have the power to do it. Like he says at the end, that there's no one to stop him. Well, what do you have the power to do exactly? What do you have the power to do? Bechira, of course. But what's that? Okay, fine, exactly. You can choose the path that you walk. You can choose the process that you enter into. You can choose derech. That's what you can choose. You can choose derech. You choose derech. You see how magnificently, right, this choosing of derech, which is the way the Rambam describes it, is has echoes both of the fact that as a result of this choosing, for the very first time in the Chumash, there is something called a derech. The derech Eitz HaChaim is introduced by virtue of this choosing. There is no such thing as a derech before man eats from the Eitz Hadat Tov V'Ra. And Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Halo b'lechtecha imanu, that you are coming now with us on the derech. That is what I can ask for. But it's more than what I can ask for. It's really all we ever have in terms of the range of what it is that we're empowered to be able to bring about. We can bring about a derech for ourselves. That's what we can bring about. And even bringing about the derech, you can't define the derech except in as much as you can be mate yourself towards the derech. And in that hataya, so in that leaning towards, you now enter into the process of becoming a tzaddik. But that's where you live. That's where you live. And that is something which comes about by virtue of Adam HaRishon's having eaten from the tree. But you see, derech is itself a creation of the first day of creation. Derech itself is a creation of man's involvement in creation. There was no derech until man became involved. Now he became involved wrongly, right? In the context that we were describing, and we could just put it very simply, he became involved wrongly by taking from the tree as a gazlan, which Chazal described basically as someone taking from the tree without making a bracha. He could have eaten with a consciousness which was not that I'm seeking to separate myself from you, to become a prat which will now be holech of its own, but rather eat from the tree in an awareness that we are entering into a derech together. Either way, that's what's accomplished. Either way, that's what's accomplished. And that's what's meant to be. But there's one way in which it's accomplished by virtue of my choosing to separate from you and violate your will. And there's another in which what I choose is to join you in the unfolding of this realization. And the definitive factor will be Ma Hashem Elokecha Shoel Mimach. What is God asking of you? He's asking of you bracha. From the very beginning, that's what he's asking of you is bracha. It's not that the only way in which Adam Harishon could accomplish this realization of the uniqueness of man was in this failure of his participation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It could have been the tikkun and nevertheless arrived at a joinder of mutuality in creative evolution that would not have been a taking which closes man off, but rather would have been a taking in the sense of an involvement. And the crucial decision and the crucial factor will be the question of whether you are making a bracha is the religious description of it, or the praxis description of it. But the consciousness of it would have been a consciousness of we are in joinder here. But either way, the only thing that I would be ever able to join you in HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being in a derech. In other words, this description of the Rambam, of the Rishus L'chol Adam Natuna, and that makes him the unique creature on the planet, is really the description of what it is that we're meant to be. It's just that this particular path was the path of destruction which caused the Siluk HaShechina. So that in a very deep sense, the avoda of Rosh Hashanah involves us in returning to this point of contact and of choosing between whether it's going to be a taking and closure or a taking of joining. Yeah.
So the Rambam is pointing out, I guess, the way I'm taking it, pointing out that he's saying you don't choose the goal. You don't choose to be the end, which is exactly Adam Harishon's mistake. You reach, it's how you get there it's the derech that you choose that is
the only thing you can choose is a derech.
The only thing you choose is a derech. If you choose the wrong derech, then you might get to the same goal. In other words, you might find we'll see the fulfillment of humanity, the illustration of what humanity is. Either way, but how you get there is the
right. What that means then is that the choice that we're faced with at Rosh Hashanah, the choice we're faced with is exactly that choice that Adam Rishon has to choose. Namely, what derech am I describing for myself? How am I visioning what it is that the path is and how it stretches forth it will be? And how deep is my consciousness of that creative involvement in making this path be is an act of bracha, and how much is it just simply my concern, my egotistical, my separate parochial concern and local concern for myself. That's mamish what Rosh Hashanah it offers us. It's okay. That's what Rosh Hashanah offers us. But it's so profound. His usage of language. I believe that the place he gets it from is mamish where the Chumash takes it from, because later on in the Perek, he tells us that this is the great yesod of the entire Torah, and the proof that it's the great yesod of the entire Torah is Re'ei Anochi Noten Lifnechem. Now Re'ei Anochi Noten Lifnechem is exactly that. What are you seeing? Why couldn't Moshe Rabbeinu just simply have said to them, Anochi notein lachem bracha uklala or chayim u'mavet, right? Without going into the chilukim between those right now. Why couldn't he have just said that? The same way the Rambam reads Moshe Rabbeinu's superfluous language Re'eh, Anochi notein lifnechem hayom. I mean, get off it. What do you want to say to me? He's like, what do you want to say to me? Okay. Tivchar b'chayim, okay? Uvacharta b'chayim. That's really what I want to say. So just say that. Bacharta b'bracha. Just say it. What do you have to go into such a, a speech? But the reason Moshe Rabbeinu has to go into a speech is because that's exactly the point. I'm not telling you that this is what you are choosing, because choice requires, by the nature of its definition in the Rambam, that you be able to actualize it. It's no such thing as choosing it if there's no possibility or no guarantee of your actualizing it. It has to be guaranteed that you can actualize it. That's if you see in the Rambam there. So the only thing that Moshe Rabbeinu can offer them is a vision of what stands before them and the choice to walk that path or not walk that path. So it's mamish in the psukim. Therefore, the superfluous language of the Rambam that you can be ratzel latot atzmo laderech tova, etc., is simply a rephrasing of what Moshe Rabbeinu does in the Re'eh. So then all you're being offered, in a sense, is the possibility of meaning yourself in a certain direction. That's really what you're offered, and that's what you can do. And in doing that, then you become what it is that you set your path to become. You become it, but you're involved always in the process of that becoming it. There's one day of the year when we get looked at, and there's what's called a shikul, or an arichas hadin. And that the Rambam describes in Perek Gimel. You'll just have to, do this work yourselves. That the Rambam describes in Perek Gimel, where he describes this whole funny thing there, right? About if you have more averas, if you have more mitzvos and tzaddik, rasha, etc. Well, because there is one day of the year that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually looks at you, and there's a moment of that rega echad, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is lo ish kel v'yichazeh. He said it. He means it. There is a moment of the year, which is a moment, which is entirely a local picture of you. There's a time of the year when there's a snapshot that's taken of you. That snapshot is an arichas hadin, which means that there is an inter-inclusion in a system of which you're a part. It's an editing. It's an edited picture. Right? So in other words, there's an oreich. But what is the oreich here? I don't know. Maybe editing. I'm not sure editing is actually the best translation of what we're describing here at all.
As a laying out.
And a laying out. Yes, better. Forget editing. It's a laying out. Right? The editor is supposed to do that, but to become. Right. It's a picture is taken, which is a picture in context of everything that you have now made yourself into. Now, on the one hand, of course, you're still in process, but on the other hand, there's a point at which we stop and look. And that stopping and looking now defines existentially what it is that you are. That happens on Rosh Hashanah. Now, it's not that you're not going to enter again into the derech subsequent that. But Rosh Hashanah, because it is the day man's created, includes both the post-eating and the pre-eating. And in the pre-eating, there is not yet a derech. There's simply what you are. That's the arichas hadin. Because what din is a description of all of the interconnecting points of what it is that you have constructed yourself into being, and then a look at that. And you're called upon to do that. That's what the Rambam in Perek Gimel describes, and he says, Afal pishet tkiyat shofar b'Rosh Hashanah gzerat hakatu, remez yeshbo, kloma, And his language is so beautiful. Klomar, ur yesheni mishenatchem, vakitzu nirdami mitardematchem. Wake up from what? Wake up from what? You're asleep. What does that mean for me to be asleep? Well, I'll tell you. Chapsu b'maasechem v'chizru b'tshuva v'zichru borachem. Remember your Creator, and it's specifically that language, that there's God as the Creator who's creating with you. Elu hashochachim et ha'emet b'havlei hazman v'shogim kol shnatam behevel v'rik asher lo yo'il v'lo yatzil habitu la'an. Where do you look? L'nafshotechem. L'nafshotechem. V'hitivu darkechem. That's all I can ask of you. Hitivu darkechem. Turn your path towards the Tov. Where will you discover that from? Well, I told you, I'm going to tell you in Perek Hey where you'll discover it from. It's me'atzmo umidato. So the only thing I can tell you is habitu lenafshotechem. What do you want? What do you want? I'm not asking you to look habitu letorati, habitu lebriti, shim'u koli. None of that. None of that. It's amazing, an amazing cry, right? Of habitu lenafshotechem. Look at yourself. That's what I'm doing today. I'm looking at you. So you look at you. What are you? What are you? Not where you're headed. What are you? What have you defined yourself as? Mamish. It's mamish. That's the day. That's the day of Rosh Hashanah. That's the day. So in a sense, with Moshe Rabbeinu's calling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his desire of Halo B'lechtecha imanu, this power of joinder between us, in which myself is so profoundly expanded to be inclusive of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's vision and my vision, and together building a path. When we finally arrive at Rosh Hashanah, so we look at what it is that we have made ourselves into. And then from there, we are able to look forward into the re'iyah of the path that we set for ourselves in what the next year will bring. Okay, so let me say it. That's the calling. Okay, we condensed. I'm watching people also getting tired, which is understandable. Understandable. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay, so yeah, I'm interested in your question.
Could you say like
Shana Tova.
a little bit more about that last piece that you said, that Rosh Hashanah is both like as a human being, or both before the eating and after the eating, and that sense of like what we are, like what does that mean? Also, just in terms of like me personally wanting to like know the context in which I'm standing while I'm davening.
I'll give a few more statements about it. I mean, first of all, the Rambam. Again, you have to. In order to really appreciate what happens here, we need to really look well at the way the Rambam writes it, because he's the great teacher of tshuva. Mamish, the great teacher of tshuva. And what he does is he actually does two things. He says that there's a shikul on Rosh Hashanah, just like there'll be a shikul on the day of your death, when it's called into place, meaning it's all weighed, and it goes this way or goes that way. So then we're describing something which is a static picture. Right? Then the Rambam goes on and he says that only the one who has a vision of the entirety of creation will ever be able to truly look at you and see what you've become. Because the vastness of the fabric of which you are a part is part and parcel to the description and the definition of what you are. How do you fit? Where do you fit? What's the context of your life? It's not just a local look, how many mitzvahs did you do? The Rambam writes, only the Keil Orech Din, which is the piyut that we say on Rosh Hashanah, which is one of the centerpieces of the whole davening. El Orech Din. It's not El Shofet Din, it's Orech, which means he, like, like when you take a dough and you spread it out, when you take a system and you systematize it. By the way, if you remember, we said that that's what God showed Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Kadosh Baruch Hu to see his ways, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ma'avir kol tuvi al panecha. You can't participate with me in my ways, which is what you're asking for, unless you have a broad vision. So that's first thing. So you're seen in a very, very broad context. I'll turn it into something which can be your avoda, don't worry. Right? That's one thing. That, from God's vision and from his perspective and from his end, so to speak, is something that you need to be doing too. Just like he's doing it to you, you have to be doing it to you. When do you do that? When you blow the shofar. That's what the Rambam just said. At that moment, we ask of you, who are you? Where are you? The Ayeka of Gan Eden is asked of you at that moment. What have you come to? What have you come to? What has your life now been as a creative process that you have undergone? Where is it? Where is it? So at that point, it's a snapshot, a rega, and it can be very unpleasant. It can be very joyous, right? It will depend on how you're able to, to relate to that. It's not okay. Yeah, and it probably should be. It probably should be, which is why you have both a tekiah. It's like all fits together, and it's really nice. And you have a trua and a shvarim. It's all broken into pieces, man, in a mess. It's like, so you definitely are in both. That's, in a sense, first day Rosh Hashanah. Second day Rosh Hashanah is post Achila, in the sense that second day Rosh Hashanah is already stepping out into the derech, meaning I am now a creature of process. And by virtue of being a creature of process, I can be a creature of sharing. They come together. That's what Adam HaRishon wanted. He just went about it in the wrong way. But instead of going about it by violating and saying, okay, I'm going to show you, man. I'm going to show you. This is like, the wrong way to come out of the first day would be, I'm going to show you, man. Yeah, that's right. This is my life. It's my life. It's my world. I'm going to do it my way. Okay? Right? Might even turn on Frank Sinatra and mamish like, I did it my way, the ultimate expression of Western Asavian hubris and achievement. Did it my way, right? Me and the mafia. Okay, so you could come out of first day that way and resentful, angry, and now counterbalancing the resentment and the anger with mine. Okay, or which is in a sense, right? I'm exaggerating just to make it an avoda, right? But in a sense, what happened with Adam HaRishon. I'm not willing to be your, basically your animal in a cage. I will take what I choose to take. And, if the world is mine, then let it be mine. The other way to come out of that first day is with a recognition that this is a big bracha, man. It's a big bracha. And I've been invited not just to say bracha. That's the religious thing. I've been invited to be a bracha. What an amazing invitation. And it could be wherever I've come to, I have come to. That's true. But then here's where you really need it. It's just so magnificent, right? People miss this. This is where you really need Parshas Nitzavim to be read before Rosh Hashanah, which is the way Chazal were talking it. You must always have Nitzavim before Rosh Hashanah because exactly what Rashi says. Atem Nitzavim Hayom. Are you here? You're still standing here. Can you stand up straight? Can you still walk? Nitzavim Vayelech. Can you? Do you? So then you are a bracha. But there's been all these klalos, there's been all these shibushim, there's been all these kilkulim. I know, but just like the day begins with night, so also your life has had all kinds of kilkulim and shibushim and yisurim. It's true. Turn that into the richness of what the next path that you choose is going to be. Turn that into the richness. Take it. Take it. Accept it. Own it. And know that the makom shebalei tshuva omdim tzadikim gmurim lo yecholim lamod, because what you have passed through, whatever it was, will be your resource for the next step. If you're mate yourself to a path, which is a path of tova, lihiyot tzadik, you become a builder. And then you become a joint builder with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's really the awakening. That's the awakening. And it's an awakening which is never a denial. It's an awakening of an incorporation. That's tshuva. So tshuva, in that sense, your act of integration of your life and redirecting it towards the derech, that act on your part is the equivalent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's looking at you and seeing what you are. You see that? You're called upon to do to yourself what he's doing, but not to stay in the rega, but actually then to shift with Moshe Rabbeinu and say, okay, if you're going to just leave it as rega echad lebekir bechem v'chiliticha. You're going to leave it that way? Can we talk like Moshe Rabbeinu talked Erev Rosh Hashanah to you? Remember when Moshe Rabbeinu talked to Erev Rosh Hashanah? It's happening right now, God. I want to walk on the way with you. Give me da'at from the Eitz Da'at, but not that I have to steal from the Eitz Da'at, not as chomeid Eitz Da'at, but as an Eitz Da'at which is taken with chen. Remember, we've spoken this out in the past. The radical difference between to be a chamud and to be a bal chen, to be cute or to be with chen, right? It's exactly the difference in Gan Eden. Are you going to be chomeid because it's nechmad lamar'eh? They took the tree, so to speak, because it was cute. Does that mean that it's cute? It's attractive to me. Attractive, so you take it because it's attractive to you. How about if it's motzei chen be'einecha? If the tree had been motzei chen be'eineim, it would have been the Eitz HaChaim mamish. Mamish would have been the Eitz HaChaim. Because to take from the tree, because it's motzei chen be'einecha, is exactly to walk together on the path the way Moshe Rabbeinu asked. Mamish. So what he's doing here, Erev Rosh Hashanah, during the course of Elul, is in a sense recreating the Gan Eden situation, describing the reality of Rosh Hashanah, the real presence of Rega Echad, of Hayom, 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 Hayom Tamtzenu, Hayom Tevarchenu, Hayom Tegadlenu, Hayom. It's like right now. And then taking that into, okay, Matzat Chen Beinecha? Do I have this chen that it's not chemda? I do. If you relate to creation that way, and if you relate to your self-creation that way, and your involvement in life that way, then mamish, halo belech techai manu. We're working together. Do you want me to put it into the short?
No. But I have another question.
It's fine. You can go. The shear's over. You best go ahead, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm sure.
So you were
No,
talking.
it's not really over. That was just a way to let him exit
So
comfortably.
you're
Anyone who
talking,
wants to exit can exit.
you were talking about like the picture, like on the second day, like, well, what about all these follow? What about all these different things, right? And where my mind went with that was sort of like the idea that we all have light and darkness. And then you said, well, actually, in the end, it's an integration. You know,
Yeah,
it's both.
absolutely.
And I'm in like a very strange place in my own internal process right now, in that you could say in my younger days as a fresh ball tshuva, you know, I saw everybody in the light of tshuva and everybody was good, right? And it's like someone didn't return my phone call, someone didn't show up when they were supposed to show up, somebody didn't do this, somebody didn't do that. It's like I was always able to see them as good, and everybody was good, and I was good. And then slowly, like the din crept up more and more and more, you know, and it's sort of like this pressure. And so, what does that voice of din want me to say? This person's a bad person. Or, oh, you want me to say I'm a bad person? Fine, I'm a bad person. I'm a bad person. I didn't call you back, right? Or this person's a bad person. They didn't call me back, right? And part of me looks at that as absurd, right? But then there's actually another part that said, okay, let's take it through. Like, let's take it all the way. This person is a bad person. I am a bad person. I didn't call this person back. You know, I didn't pay back whatever it is. I didn't return my library book. You know what I mean? And then what? Do I not deserve to live now? You know what I mean? Do I not deserve to exist because whatever it is? And all of a sudden I'm seeing that rather than having to push that voice of din away, of saying I'm a bad person, it's like, okay, I am a bad person, and there's also tshuva.
Right. Nice.
You know.
And tshuva in this very deep sense of an incorporative and enriched one. Yeah. Wow.
Right, and then I don't have to push it away. It's not a
Right.
constant. It's
Right.
like I can
Now
see.
there's process. There's process, right? Like you know, like the Baal Shem Tov describes, which is a true process. The Rambam describes at the beginning, different stages in Hilchos Tshuva. But there's a process of pushing it away, of like a havdalah or hachna'ah, right, in the language of the Baal Shem Tov. There's that process too, but ultimately it needs to lead to a higher tshuva, which involves a hamtaka, sweetening, which isn't the greatest language, but it's I would just call it an incorporation, an integration. The arichas hadin, involves that broad picture.
Oh, so he
Right.
means to take it in, or
Yeah, no, the arichas hadin is it's the spreading of the din. Right. It's like it's the spreading of it in the sense of it's becoming part of a broader system and vision. Mm.
A card, you make cards.
Right.
You can see the one that's hidden behind you, nicely hidden. It's like
Yeah.
all right there.
Oh, yeah, that's right. This memory is amazing, amazing. That's really the vision that's offered you on Rosh Hashanah. Yeah.
Applying that to me personally.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like uncover that.
Right. That's right. 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 Right.
Reminds me
Right.
of
Right.
dialogue in the Sefer Shabbat. It's a dialogue between Yitzchak Avinu and Hakadosh Baruch Hu, in which Yitzchak basically uses din. It shows how absurd it is, and the attitude is din, because din itself can't justify its own existence.
Whatever it is, I'm thinking was I'm like it's my identity. I'm God. Like a snapshot. In a way, because it's binary, I was supposed to. I did something bad. It's part of the snapshot. Included in the identity attack. Most of the time, I'd be concerned about that state. But what I heard Eitan saying was like that the extremity of that identity can be positive.
Right. It can become
So now what?
right. So now what? Right. As long as you say that. So now what?
right, exactly.
Do you think it's healthy? I'm sure that part of the